I'm Sonny Grint, Director of Education for Husqvarna Viking and singer in North America. And I'm so excited to be here at Classic Sewing to do a 4-week sew-along where we're going to make this cute little crossbody bag for your kids to go back to school. And also, if you choose, you can make it a little bit bigger. And by making it a little bit bigger, you can use it as well. For the 4 weeks, we're going to do some cutting with our Memento, some embroidery with our Husqvarna Viking Designer Epic 3, and then in the 4th week, we're just going to play around and have some fun with a bonus group of projects. So, are you ready? Let's get started. So let's get started with our sew-along by getting all of the supplies you need right away. So besides your Memento crafting and cutting machine, and of course your embroidery machine, what we want to do is have the faux leather. Now look in your instructions, everybody, because that's going to give you the amounts of leather, the faux leather you need, the fabric. This fabric, I love this beautiful batik, but it is something that you really, you can choose any fabric for this. You're just going to, again, need enough for piping and lining and all that. Again, check out your instructions. That has all the amounts that you need. And of course, a nice iron-on stabilizer. So those are the types of fabrics that you need for your crossbody bag. Then we're going to go ahead and you're going to need a couple clips because that's what's going to hook onto the bag right there. So you're going to need the clips as well as the little rings. And you want a nice, this little clasp. I like this little clasp. It's a metal clasp. So it's metal, but it's also magnetic. So it's really a nice way to keep your bag closed when you're working with that. So we're going to use that to begin with. You're going to want to have, again, it's a glue pen, so something like that, some little cord for your piping, invisible, or not invisible, excuse me, wash away thread, some good scissors. With needles, I just want to make sure that you realize when you're working with needles for a faux leather, you want to go ahead, and this needle, we're actually using an embroidery needle for our embroidery. You can use that for your sewing as well, but a leather needle is for real leather. So because this is faux leather, you want to use the embroidery needle. Even a stretch needle can work for you for this. You're going to need some spray starch, your embroidery hoop, around 100 by 100. So basically the size is 100 by 100. Mine is 120 by 120. So a little bit smaller embroidery hoop is fine. But also, I've already got this prepped, but this is a sticky stabilizer. So it's a sticky tearaway stabilizer within the hoop. A point turner, and I love, this is a really great point turner that Classic Sewing has. I love this, but I got to tell you, this little point turner here, this was something my mom actually got me when I first started sewing. It's an old-fashioned style, but I tell you, I use it all the time too. So any type of point turner will work for you. And the other thing with your embroidery machine, yes, we're going to do embroidery, but we're also doing sewing. So you want to make sure you have, it's either a welt foot or a zipper foot that's going to help you with your piping. And then also, I love this foot. This is a non-stick foot. It's slick on the back. And so with it being slick on the back, what that allows you to do is for that leather, it allows you to go right over very easily. So you need a couple extra feet to make sure you're ready to go. All right, everyone. So I'm going to just kind of clear my space. And by the way, I forgot to say, a little embroidery thread, a little sewing thread. I think we all know that, but you want to make sure you have the colors that you want. And so I'm just going to slide everything off to the side. And with our cutting machine, you also are going to need a couple mats. So that comes with your cutting machine. With our Memento, I have a couple different sizes. Got a really big mat and a little bit smaller mat. So you're going to need those mats. And then we're just going to open this up. Touch the screen to light her up, and now we're ready to start cutting. All right, everybody, we're ready to cut. I went ahead and turned my memento around. And before we actually do the cutting itself, I want to go through a couple things for you to make sure you know why and what and how we get set up for this. The first thing I want to talk a moment about is are the mats. There are different styles of mats that you will use. This one I have on top, that's what comes with your memento. It is called a standard grip mat. So it has a nice grip to it. You can kind of feel that a little bit. But basically, this is for most of the things you're going to do if you're working with paper, that sort of thing. However, because we are using today more fabric type of materials, we're going to use the true fabric mat. It's a different color and it has a different grip to it. So you can see I've already prepped this a little bit, but it's a little bit stickier. It has a different feel to it. So this type of mat is what you really do want to use for fabric, that sort of stuff. So you saw when we got started, or when I flipped it around, that the memento does have this great front that gives you a nice opening. It gives you a nice flat area. Before we actually put our mat through, what I want to show you is we also have what are called carriages over here. And these carriages hold the blades, and it also holds pins if you're ever going to do any writing or any sort of decoration with a pin. So that's for the left carriage. The right carriage is where we put our blades. So this is where the blade is going to go. So today I am going to use, this is a very special blade. It's a rotary blade. And you want to be very careful with all of your blades. Notice this has got a little plastic cup on it. And what that's doing is that's protecting it, because that is a super sharp, just like your other rotary blades, that's a super sharp blade. So you want to be very careful with that. We're going to, because I already know I want to use this for my fabric, I'm going to put this in the right carriage. And it's super important when I push that down, oh, you can just barely see it. There's a little green light that comes on, and that means you've got that engaged. This is what is called a smart blade. So it's going to move as what you need, actually. So that's really great. But the other thing that's super important, once you get your blade in there, you have to lock it. So make sure you push that in, and that actually locks the blade in place. Same thing if you're using a pin. You have to lock it in place. So it's really important you do that. The next thing that we're going to do is we are going to load our mat, get it started, and with the mat itself. So again, you saw this earlier when I was talking about it, but it is important. This fabric mat, like I said, I already went ahead and I placed my faux leather on my mat. And what I'm doing is I like to place it, push it nice with my hands first, but then I'm going to use what's called a brayer. And I'm just going to roller this and make sure that my faux leather is really on the mat, nice and flat and even. So that brayer is super helpful to get that on there and to make sure, again, it's nice, flat and even. So that's really important. We're getting ready to load our mat. And to load the mat, there are a couple things that I want to make sure you realize. First, our memento, which is really cool, it has this nice back flat area. So it looks like there are little handles here, but those really aren't handles. That's actually to hold that piece in the back so it's at a nice level part. So you're going to have nice cutting that way. So that's really great. So make sure you put that down. And then we're going to work with what are called pinch wheels. With the pinch wheels, those are these little pieces down here. These are little rollers. And those rollers, so these guys here, that's what moves the mat back and forth. And so these pinch wheels are going to be super important that you have them in the proper places on your mat as well. So with that, I'm just going to raise my pinch wheels. For any of you who have a serger at home, you kind of already know this, but down is up and up is down, which I know is crazy, but when I push this down, it raises the pinch wheels up. So now I can load my mat. So make sure that is in the proper place. So on your memento, what you want to do, over here, right on this edge, and over here on this edge, and they continue back, all the way back. It's almost like a little curb. And so what I need to do is I need to make sure that my mat goes underneath both of these little carriage areas. So you can see how I'm going all the way back, right under this, but also clear back here, making sure that everything is aligned. And then once I get to this area here, I want to make sure that my mat is basically parallel. So it's even with this front part of my memento. So super important for that. The last thing that we need to do is remember those pinch wheels I just talked about. The pinch wheels, again, that's what holds, it's kind of like a presser foot on your sewing machine, right? It holds the mat and lets things move back and forth. Well, they have to be in the proper position. So there are 4 pinch wheels. The one on the very left, it never moves. That's set. The one on the right, it's going to be important that we move that pinch wheel. Again, remember, I had said earlier that we have these pinch wheels up. You cannot do this if your pinch wheels are down. You cannot move the pinch wheels unless they are in the up position. So once I get that pinch wheel all the way to the right, you want the pinch wheel to run, whatever size mat you're on, you want it to run on the edge of the mat, not in the mat. So see that? You can see that really well. It's going to be right on that edge of the mat. The other pinch wheels, I'm just going to move them a little bit easier, kind of so they're in the middle. They're going to be on my fabric, so I'm just moving these so they're on the fabric. But the other thing that's really important is there are 2 areas that a pinch wheel should never be. And it's marked right there. It's kind of a little, and right here. They're like a little circle with a line through it. So that means do not put your pinch wheel in that area. Those are the 2 areas, and right there, that you never want to put a pinch wheel. So, okay, so we're back. This is even here. We've got our pinch wheels in the proper positions. We've got our blade locked and ready to go. Now I'm going to put those pinch wheels down. So now they're down on the mat. And now it's all ready. That was a lot of talking, but I want to make sure that you guys understand why we're doing this and how important it is that you do it in the proper way. All right? So now that we're here, we're ready to load our mat. So let's go over to our screen, and I'm just going to simply touch Load Mat. And when I do that, all of a sudden things start to happen. It moves a lot faster than I expect, always. No matter how often I do this, it goes in, out. And what that just did is it told the memento how big my mat is and where it is on basically in the machine. So again, important that you do that. But loading the mat, even after you pause or you change, you always have to load the mat. So make sure you do that. All right, everybody. So we're ready to go here. Now let's go ahead and we're going to go over to our computer, and you're going to see what those beautiful, how easy it is to cut all of the different pieces for our little crossbody bag. So everybody, we're ready to go ahead, send our designs or our cut files from the computer over, but I do want to tell you, Alicia did a great job helping us out with this fun little crossbody bag. And she made the files in a perfect way. One is if you want to wear your little crossbody bag on your left hip, there's another set of files that if you want to wear it on your right hip. So you kind of have to decide. It really doesn't matter so much, but the way that the design is created, there's one for your right, one for your left. So you decide what you want to do first, all right? So let's get to our computer. And I am in the Memento crafting software. So I'm in the Memento crafting software, and I'm going to choose I didn't mention, but I did use a 12 by 24 inch mat, and we're doing it in the basically in the landscape position. So you can see that right there on the computer. And then when you get your instructions, you're also going to get these cutting files. So I'm going to load or insert from my device, which actually is my computer here. And I'm just going to go ahead and grab my classic sewing file folder and what I'm doing here in the taping. And I don't know if you can see that very well, but one says worn on left hip and one says worn on right hip. So it's that simple. So I'm going to choose the worn on right hip, and then we're going to choose the leather on the right. So when I open this, you're going to see, and yeah, you can see that really well. You can see here's the outer part of the bag, and here's my little pocket. So that's what we're cutting out of the leather to begin with. So that's our beginning. So I'm going to just scoot it over. You don't really have to. It comes in a good position, so you don't really have to do that. I guess as a sewist, we always kind of want to use the least amount of fabric that we're doing. So I just kind of scooted that over just a little bit. And now I'm just going to send to my machine. Now, one of the interesting things about your Memento is the Memento is a Wi-Fi capable machine. So if you have great Wi-Fi, you can certainly transfer all of your files to the Memento with Wi-Fi. I don't have great Wi-Fi at home, but also when you're in studio, sometimes the Wi-Fi goes in and out because of all the sound dampening and things like that. So you also have the ability, and I know it's going to be hard to see, but I have a little blue cable here. So it's just a USB cable that I can also send. So if you want to be sure, you're not sure if your Wi-Fi is going to be great today, then I go ahead and use that blue cable. Doesn't matter, up to you. But that is something that is available, the blue cable, and also the Wi-Fi, which is really fabulous. So now let's go back to the computer here for a moment. And so I've got send direct to the US with the USB cable, and I'm going to now send to my machine. And it's just confirming, do I have the right mat? So I've got the right mat. Here is also, when it talks about materials, what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose fabric. And leather is not actually one of the fabrics that it has here, but what we're going to do is we're going to say it's like an extra heavy fabric, okay? So it's like an extra heavy fabric. And then I'm going to continue. The reason why you choose extra heavy or choose the fabric that you want, that's going to change actually the amount of pressure. So really the amount of pressure that the blade is cutting with, okay? So that's why you choose the proper fabric, is because it's going to set that up for you. Then you can also test. You can make sure you have the right amount of heaviness for your cutting. So that is really key. So back to our computer, you can see here, this is exactly what it looked like before. I've got my mat in landscape heavy fabric, material size, flip for reverse cutting. We do not have to do that. And so then let's click next. And this is where, if I didn't know already, you can see this little picture here. That is what our rotary blade looks like. So it's telling me, because of the fabric that I chose, that this is, you should insert your rotary blade. And notice it's also telling me to put it in the right carriage. So we've already done that. I already kind of knew that, so that's why I did that. The force over here is actually the force again. Because I played around a little bit with this, I'm going to raise the force just slightly because I practiced. Speed at 400 is great. And when I click continue, now it's sending to the cutting machine here. And when I go over to the cutting machine, I can actually start from the computer. I personally like to start from the cutting machine itself. So it says here, start cutting. And when we start cutting, now we're going to go back over to the blade. And the blade, it's hard to see on camera, but what I want you to realize is it's going to spin a little bit. And it's okay that it's spinning because it's supposed to do that. And now it's just going to cut. Cutting all the way around. So it's doing those first main pieces. And this is fascinating. For those of you who are embroiderers, think about the first time that you ever embroidered. You were like, oh, I got to watch this forever. That's me. I have to watch everything that I'm doing here. So I can see it's cutting great. Now it's cutting the little pocket. And the other thing that, again, I find extremely fascinating for me is how does it know when to cut and where to cut? I think it's so cool. It's getting done, so it's going back to the other edge. And at this point, guys, you're done cutting your leather pieces. Wasn't that easy? I mean, it was so super fast, super easy. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and lift up the leather or the faux leather. I keep saying leather, but it is faux leather, everyone, that we didn't use. So all I'm going to do, and let's go ahead, and I can see how nicely this cuts. So I'm going to go ahead and just lift this off. Check that out. Isn't that the coolest thing? So here is my first outside piece. It's like Christmas. You're taking a little package. You're opening up your package here. And then right there. And there it is. Isn't that so cool? I love that we were able to just cut that. I didn't have to worry about scissors. It's the perfect size. Thank you, Alicia, for doing it for both right and left hip. And I tell you what, this is what we're going to do for the rest of the cutting, right? So we're going to do what we did here. We're going to do for the lining. We're going to do even for the bias binding or the bias piece that you're going to use for your piping. So lots of really cool stuff. Let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and just get ready with our other mats. And then we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to get our new file in our computer, send it over and cut. All right, everybody. Now that we've got this cut, we need to make sure we eject the mat, and that's going to pull it back out so we can take our pieces off. So it's real simple. We're just going to touch close on our screen, and then the little thing comes up that says eject mat. And when I touch that, it just rolls it out from underneath the pinch wheels back here. So now that I've got this piece, I'm just going to go ahead, let's go ahead and take off what we cut. I'm just going to set those aside. Comes off real easy. We've got these great, big, nice, large pieces. So I'm just going to set those to the side. And before I leave this mat and before we start loading other mats, when you store your mat, you should always store it. I don't know if you noticed, there was a really shiny little plastic piece, right? So here's this little plastic piece. I always struggle to get this on nice and even. And of course, when I'm showing you this, my struggle, it always goes on just right. But let me give you a little tip. What I like to do with this piece is I actually roll it up and just make a little piece like that and make sure all the edges are even. And then, and this is especially good when you have those super big mats, but now once I start here, I can get that first part nice and even. And then like that, it's so super easy. So when you store your mat, you've got the plastic on top, so it doesn't get all stuck to different things, and it keeps it nice and clean. So roll it up and then let it go out, and it'll just make it a lot easier for you when you're putting that plastic piece, so you're storing your mat in a good way. All right. So once we have, I have 4 different mats for fabric because I use it a lot, and then I can put fabric on the mats. So that's what I did this time. So I don't have to like replace the mat and put it back on. So if you have the luxury, go ahead and get yourself a couple mats because that'll make it a lot easier for you when you're doing large projects like this. Now, again, I mentioned Alicia did a great job with the right and the left hip. Well, here's the other thing. You also, for the lining and for all those other pieces, you also want to use the left or the right side. So that's important for it. And she also gave you two options. Remember, with Memento, we have the ability to use these super large 24 by 24 inch mats. And then you would cut all this piece, so your lining and your straps and all that, all in one cutting. And she has that set for you. It's a little bit hard to show on screen, so we're going to actually use two 12 by 24 inch mats to do our cutting. So with that super large mat, I'm just setting it aside. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use, and again, I told you I preloaded the mat. So I'm going to use these two pieces, or these two mats, I should say, for the cutting. We're going to do the exact same thing as we did before, as far as loading the mat, as far as getting our design or our cutting file from the computer over to the Memento. So we're not going to go through the detail that we did before, but I do want to tell you, I will tell you when we get to the computer that I do choose a different fabric. Remember, I chose heavy fabric for the faux leather, whereas we're going to choose quilting fabric or quilting cotton for the fabric that we're using for the lining. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to raise our pinch wheels. They're all set in the proper place. Make sure that that's aligned. Put that down. We're going to load our mat. So again, once you get this, it's all super, super easy. Same thing over and over and over, just like in sewing. We're doing the exact same thing to make sure you're just consistent like that. Let's go back over to our computer. And this was our previous design. So I'm going to insert, again, from my device. And this time I'm going to do the lining cutting part 1, which is this piece here. And I'm going to click open. And before I send this to the machine, real quick, I do want to share with you something that I think is really cool. If you can kind of see over here, this piece here, we're actually going to cut on the bias of our fabric, which is really great. This is going to go around our piping, which is what you want. You want it to be biased. But look at that right there on the Memento, just cut at a 45-degree angle. So you can do bias that easy on Memento. And then here are little applique fabric or our applique pieces as well. So all of that can be done right on Memento, which is the coolest thing to me. Super fast, easy, no getting out those scissors, no trying to figure out where am I going to do it. It's all done right there for you. So let's go ahead, send to machine. I'm in landscape, which is what we just loaded. This time, notice quilting cotton came up straight away. So I'm just going to use quilting cotton. That was the change that I wanted to make. We're going to confirm. And then we're just going to continue on. So here's the rotary blade. We've already got that in there. And let's continue. And again, it's loading. So we're going to do this for all the next pieces. I'm going to click start cutting. And then we're going to just let it cut. And then we're going to move right on to our next mat once we get done with this. So you'll just see it cut a little bit and then we'll continue on. All right, so now we're finished with, this was part 1. So this is the lining part 1. And once we get done with that, let's go ahead and close again, and we're going to eject the mat. All right, and once we eject the mat, then we're able to go ahead and take off our pieces. And there we go. Little bits all in there. So we're making sure we've got everything we need here. There's that great bias piece. And then our little bitty applique pieces. I think those are so fun. So that's all right there. So this again, this is part 1 with the bias and the applique. We're going to go ahead, let's load our mat again, and we're going to do part 2 of our lining. So let's go ahead. I went ahead and loaded this mat again, or already with the fabric. We're going to do the exact same thing. This is the beauty of having those extra mats, is we can just go ahead, put that down, load the mat. All right, once that's ready to go, let's go back to our computer. And we're going to cancel what we have on there right now. Let's delete the part 1, and we're just going to insert part 2. And so here's part 2. Go ahead and open that, and what we can see, these are actually, this is going to be all about our straps. So those are our straps. So let's send to machine. And again, quilting cotton. There we go there. And then next. And again, just because I had learned, I make that a little bit more. Continue. And once that's there, we'll just start cutting. All right, so we're finished with this. We're going to go ahead again. Let's take this off, and you'll notice I didn't eject the mat. I probably should have ejected the mat first, but because I knew where the cutting was going to be, it was down a little bit, I knew I could pull this off. So now I have my straps. So let's go ahead, close and eject that mat. So get that out from under the pinch wheels, and let's set that one aside too. And the last thing that we're going to create or work with is we're actually going to cut our interfacing. Now I do, when I'm got things stacked up, I put that little plastic sheet on so it doesn't stick to other pieces or my mats don't stick together. But make sure you take that off before you start cutting. Otherwise, you're going to lose your plastic storage piece. So make sure you take that off. So we're going to load again. So make sure we're even here. Pinch wheels down, load the mat. I don't care how many times I watch that, that's so darn fast. That's just really quick. And then let's come over to our software. And delete that piece. And the last piece that we're going to do is our interfacing. So, and I say, yeah, there we go. There's our interfacing up there. That's the cut file for all the things we need with our interfacing. And then I'm going to send to machine. And again, once you do this a couple times, you start to see that it's all the same. You get really consistent with that. So I'm going to make sure I have that all green there. I'm going to click next. Again, the rotary cutter, everything is even, and continue. And our last piece that we're going to cut. All right, and start cutting. Again, I'm just fascinated when I look at this. All right, everybody, we're ready to eject this mat. And then we're ready to take this off. Now, I forgot, basically, because we did this all the same, I do want to remind us that with the interfacing, this was an iron-on interfacing. So, you know, the one side that has the iron-on glue, that needs to be up when you load your mat. So make sure you go ahead and put that up. Because that way it'll make sure it's the right way when you turn it over and you actually iron on your iron-on interfacing. So, all right, so let's just go ahead and pull this off. Again, it has all the pieces and parts. These little squares we're going to use for the where we put our little clasp, and then this is for our straps, and then of course the interfacing for the inside of our lining. So everyone, can you believe how fast that was? That was so cool to be able to use our memento. I didn't have to get out scissors. Everything is done, and now we're going to be ready to go ahead. Now, before we're done with week 1, I want to do the embroidery because I think that's a super fast thing to do. And so we're going to actually do the embroidery in week 1 now, and that'll be fun, a fun way to get our embroidery machine going and go ahead and finish up with our memento. So, all right, everybody, the last thing we're going to do for week 1 is we are going to embroider our little leaves. So if you remember, we have our little leaves here for our crossbody bag. The cool thing is, again, we had a right crossbody bag and a left crossbody bag. And so you want to make sure, like this one was the left, so I have the leaves are tumbling one way, and here the leaves are tumbling a different way. So make sure you choose the proper embroidery for which way you're going to wear your bag, all right? So that's going to be important. And then the other thing is, I went ahead and I changed my machine. So I've got the proper embroidery presser foot on. So I'm using the Q foot for our Husqvarna Viking Designer Epic 3s. So make sure you have on your embroidery foot. I went ahead, and that's this foot here. It makes it real easy to work with our embroidery. In the bobbin, also make sure you have on bobbin threads. So I made sure to have a full bobbin with the lighter weight bobbin thread when you do embroidery. Up on top, I wanted to make sure that I had my embroidery. I'm using a rayon embroidery thread on top. So I've got this beautiful embroidery thread on top. You can use whatever color is going to work with your bag. So I just chose a kind of a more fall type green for the bag that I'm doing. And at the beginning, we talked about an embroidery needle. So make sure you have everything set properly for embroidery on your machine. Like I said, with my Designer Epic 3, I have everything set up properly for that. The other thing before, again, we get started with all of this is I showed this at the beginning when we were talking about what we were doing with stabilizers, what you needed. But this was really important that this is a sticky stabilizer. When you're using faux leather, when you're using, anything that's going to squish down, so like velvets, things like that, you want to use a sticky stabilizer. This is a tearaway sticky stabilizer. There are different styles and brands. This one for me, because it's a small hoop, it comes off the roll sticky, so I'm able to get that right in the hoop. I prefer, this is my preference, you may have other teachers say other things, but I prefer to hoop my sticky stabilizer. Some people will say just stick it on the back of the hoop. I personally don't like that. The only reason is because it makes my hoop all messy. So I prefer to hoop my sticky stabilizer. So again, up to you, but in my case, I'm going to hoop that. So I've got that ready to go. So now that I have my machine set, I've got my hoop set, I've got my stabilizer all ready to go, then I'm going to use the design that was created with those tumbling leaves. And so I already set up the design right on my screen. It's ready for the right side bag. So it's got that little right, turn to it. So it's got the right side bag. And with that, I'm now going to get ready to put it in the right place on my little piece. So, we're going to embroider on this piece. So for me, I'm going to take my hoop with that sticky stabilizer, and then I'm going to go ahead and you can mark. There's a little bitty mark. You're going to mark a certain distance from the bottom and from the side. And then I'm just going to stick that right on the center of my sticky stabilizer. And there's just, again, a little bitty mark right there that's going to be the center of the embroidery. But one of the beautiful things about our Husqvarna Viking Designer Epic 3 is it has something that is called hoop scanning. So rather than just hoping that that's going to be in the right place, let's go ahead and scan our hoop so we can see and make sure that our design is going to be in the perfect spot. So with the hoop scanning, all I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to hoop options. And what this allows me to do is either change the background color. I could change it to that brown of that faux leather, or I can do what's called scan hoop. And I think the scan hoop is really cool in this instance. So when I touch scan hoop here, it's going to ask me, do you want to start the hoop scan? And I'm going to say yes. So let's start the hoop scan. It's going to give me instructions. So touch OK to start the hoop scan. It says remove the presser foot for best results. What's happening is our Epic 3 is taking little pictures all over here. And so because it's taking pictures, if you have your presser foot on, it can make it just basically you can see the presser foot. For time today, I'm just going to say, okay, I'm going to leave my presser foot on. And now the arm is moving into place. So now that I have the arm in place, we're going to choose, it says Designer Splendid Square Hoop, the 120 by 120. So I've already got that set up here, and I'm just going to simply slide this over and make sure I put that in place. So now this is in place. I've got my hoop attached. And this is the cool part. It's now scanning. It's taking little pictures of what's in the hoop. And it brings the light really super high, so it's going to get the best picture available here. So that's actually really cool. So our lighting is so great anyway, but now it made that really nice. It dims it down now to where I had it before. And once I say, okay, when I say scan hoop, I'm going to go back to hoop options over here, touch that, and look at that. There is, honestly, there's my little tumbling, I call them tumbling leaves because they look like they're little falling leaves. And I can see, oh gosh, that's not quite in the right spot. So I can scoot it over, place it wherever I want it to be, right on my picture of my hoop. But guess what? That's what's exactly here, right in the hoop. So if I needed to scoot something over or if I needed to move it, I can see right on my screen exactly where my little leaves are going to be. So this is so cool. That scan hoop is just such a fabulous option. So I'm just going to move it just a little bit more, because if I didn't hoop properly, guess what? That means I can make those adjustments here without having to re-hoop. So that's really, really neat. So now that I have this set and I know that that's where I want it to be, I'm just going to simply touch Stitch Out. So I'm ready to stitch out. There are a few things right on screen. I make sure I do have on the standard plate, I have the Designer Splendid hoop 2, which is my 120 by 120 hoop. I already mentioned I've got the Q foot on. If I scroll up, we're not going to merge colors because how this design was created, it's going to do a stitch down line first. So we're going to do that first. I am going to use the deluxe stitch system. I don't need to baste. And this is something that's kind of important, everyone. When you are using faux leather or real leather or anything that when you put a needle puncture through, that you're going to end up basically that hole's going to be there, you don't want to baste. So it is kind of important that you're not going to baste for that. So it is, again, it's kind of important that you don't baste for that. So, all right. So now that I've got all of these options kind of all set up, so I'm ready to go with that, I'm just simply going to click apply. So that's the last thing I'm going to do is just simply come in here and click apply. So we're ready to stitch out. This is what's so cool. So now it's applied. We're ready to go. I'm in embroidery stitch out and I'm ready to touch start stop on the front of the machine. So when you're ready to go with that, make sure, and I want to make sure that I've got my thread is all right there. So it's all ready to go. So got that there. I tend to hold my thread. You certainly don't have to anymore with the machines, but I've just done this a couple times, so I like to hold my thread when I get started. And then I'm simply going to press start stop. When I do that, it's going to take that first little, there we go, you can see that a little better. And then just go ahead, it's going to start. This is what I was talking about before, is notice it's making a placement line. So it's actually doing a placement line where my little applique is going to go. So that's the first step, is making that placement line. And so if you remember from the cutting, this was really cool because with that cutting, it cut out my little applique pieces. Now, this is also where, everyone, if you see, and I got to get my glasses for this one, if you see here, there are a few little jump stitches. I had it set so that my machine did not actually clip those jump stitches for me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come back in here, and this is where, if you saw these scissors at the beginning, these are like my favorite applique, but also embroidery scissors. See how they come over the top of that hoop, so it's easy to get to pieces and parts. So there, see how nice those scissors work. I think that's really great. The next thing we're going to do, everybody, is we are going to use our glue stick, actually, because the glue stick will allow us to put our little pieces down, and then we're going to stitch around those. So I'm just going to come back over here to the front and grab my glue stick and my little applique pieces. And that being said, you want to make sure that when you're using your glue stick, right, you want to make sure that you're being very careful. And I don't want to get glue on my machine, so I'm going to be a little bit careful and make sure I've got these in the right direction. And then I'm just going to put glue, and you want to make sure you get glue all the way out to the edges, and especially those little stems. I found that the little stems become super important. You can see I'm just getting glue all the way out to those edges. And then when I put this, I'm going to, you know what? I'm going to maybe throw off the camera, guys, here for just a minute, but I'm going to actually move this a little bit toward me. That's this great hoop position. I'm going to go to what's called trim position, and you can see now, you can see a little bit easier. And you can also see it's easier for me, right, to get that all nice and glued down in the right spot. So there we go. So that made it a lot easier. My next leaf is going to go there. So we'll make sure I get glue all the way to those outside edges. So all the way. And again, the stem is what I found when I was doing my test sewing. The most important to get that stem because it's so fine. It's just such a nice little piece, but I want to make sure that that is all in the right spot and really down there, ready to go. And then my last little leaf is going to go here. And so let's go ahead and glue stick that down. And once I have that all nice down, and again, that stem has a lot of great space. So you can see, there we go. And that's the beauty of how, you know, we make appliques for embroidery like this, is that because it does that stitch, that placement line first, so that was actually the placement line, because it does that first, you can see exactly where to put your pieces. And I just noticed my last stem, I just need a little bit more glue because I want to make sure that that's down in a really good way. All right, so once you have that done, I'm just going to, in my hoop position, I'm just going to go to current stitch position, and we're ready to start the embroidery for sure now. So we did the placement line. Now we're going to do a stitch down and the applique on the outside edge. So I like to use a satin stitch for that outside edge. Some people will use like a hand look applique. It really is kind of when you're creating your design, you can do what you want to do. But in this case, this is the way that we created it, and it's so pretty for what we're doing. So let's go ahead, press start, stop, and we'll just get started embroidering. So this is our stitch down line. So we went ahead and did a nice little stitch down line there. And now we're going to start the underlay for the embroidery portion. And here's where we're going to start that really nice satin stitch. And everyone, I'm just going to stop this for a minute because the next two leaves are going to be just the same. But by going to the trim position, I think you'll be able to see how pretty that satin stitch is. You can see how it just went around that edge. It's got that real pretty satin stitch going on. It's going to do the exact same thing. So remember, we had our placement line. We glued and stuck down our little applique pieces. Then we did a stitch down line, and then that beautiful satin stitch on that outside edge. So we'll go ahead and continue this. And then when we get finished, you'll see how beautiful these little tumbling leaves are, and we'll be ready to go on to our next step. So I'm going to go ahead. Let's get back to our current stitch position and continue sewing. All right, everybody, we're finished with our embroidery. It was that quick and easy. I think this is a really cute fall design, but you could do it for almost any season if you really wanted to, depending upon your fabric that you chose. My screen just said my embroidery is finished, so I know that's ready to go. All we're going to do, I'm going to touch OK on the screen just to say that, let the machine know it is finished. But then when you take your hoop off, and you see you've got your great little piece right here. Here's the little thing that I want to make sure that you're a little bit careful of, is I'm going to go ahead and take my fabric, or my little pocket actually, out of my hoop. And this is where you'll see it did stick to this little area here, but I'm just going to be careful. I don't want my hoop to get all messy, so I'm just being a little careful here on how I get that out of the hoop. And then you see here, I'm just going to flip over and carefully remove my stabilizer. So I'm just being real careful here on how I'm taking it off. I don't want to rip and tear too hard because I want to be careful of my backing and my fabric. And there we go, everyone. There is our nice little design. You can go in there now and use your scissors and clip any extra threads that you may see. So you can go in there and clean that up. But now, everyone, we've got our pocket all embroidered. We've got everything else cut. Now we're ready to go to week 2, because week 1, I want to thank you guys for being with me, first of all. But week 1, we just wanted to get everything ready. Week 2, we're going to start to make our little bag. And then week 3, we're going to end up putting it all together. So we're going to start with week 2. So please come back, because we're going to give you some more tips and hints on how to work with the faux leather and how to make that great lining and all sorts of different things with that. Week 3, we're going to put it all together, finish it up. And then week 4, we've got a bonus for you. So I'm prepping you. I want you all to come back and be with me and finish up our little crossbody bag. Thanks for joining.